The Book of Joel, Chapter 1. The word of the Lord that came to Joel the son of Pethuel. Hear this, ye old men, and give ear, all ye inhabitants of the land. Hath this been in your days, or even in the days of your fathers? Tell ye your children of it, and let your children tell their children, and their children another generation. That which the palmer worm hath left, hath the locust eaten. And that which the locust hath left, hath the cankerworm eaten. And that which the cankerworm hath left, hath the caterpillar eaten. Awake, ye drunkards, and weep, and howl, all ye drinkers of wine, because of the new wine, for it is cut off from your mouth. For a nation is come up upon my land, strong and without number, whose teeth are the teeth of a lion, and he hath the cheek teeth of a great lion. He hath laid my vine waste, and barked my fig tree. He hath made it clean, bare, and cast it away. The branches thereof are made white. Lament like a virgin girded with sackcloth for the husband of her youth. The meat offering and the drink offering is cut off from the house of the Lord. The priests, the Lord's ministers, mourn. The field is wasted, the land mourneth. For the corn is wasted, the new wine is dried up. The oil languisheth. Be ye ashamed, O ye husbandmen, howl, O ye vine-dressers, for the wheat and for the barley, because the harvest of the field is perished. The vine is dried up, and the fig tree languisheth, the pomegranate tree, the palm tree also, and the apple tree, even all the trees of the field are withered, because joy is withered away from the sons of men. Gird yourselves, and lament, ye priests. Howl, ye ministers of the altar. Come, lie all night in sackcloth, ye ministers of my God. For the meat offering and the drink offering is withholden from the house of your God. Sanctify ye a fast. Call a solemn assembly. Gather the elders and all the inhabitants of the land into the house of the Lord your God, and cry unto the Lord. Alas for the day of the Lord is at hand, and as a destruction from the Almighty shall it come. Is not the meat cut off before our eyes, yea, joy and gladness from the house of our God? The seed is rotten under their clods, the garners are laid desolate, the barns are broken down, for the corn is withered. How do the beasts groan? The herds of cattle are perplexed, because they have no pasture. Yea, the flocks of sheep are made desolate. O Lord, to thee will I cry. For the fire hath devoured the pastures of the wilderness, and the flame hath burned all the trees of the field. The beasts of the field cry also unto thee. For the rivers of waters are dried up, and the fire hath devoured the pastures of the wilderness. Joel 2. Blow ye the trumpet in Zion, and sound an alarm in my holy mountain. Let all the inhabitants of the land tremble, for the day of the Lord cometh, for it is nigh at hand, a day of darkness and of gloominess, a day of clouds and of thick darkness, as the morning spread upon the mountains, a great people and a strong. There hath not been ever the like, neither shall be any more after it, even to the years of many generations. A fire devoureth before them, and behind them a flame burneth. The land is as the Garden of Eden before them, and behind them a desolate wilderness, yea, and nothing shall escape them. The appearance of them is as the appearance of horses, and as horsemen, so shall they run. Like the noise of chariots on the tops of mountains shall they leap, like the noise of a flame of fire that devoureth the stubble, as a strong people set in battle array. Before their face the people shall be much pained, all faces shall gather blackness. They shall run like mighty men, they shall climb the wall like men of war, and they shall march every one on his ways, and they shall not break their ranks. Neither shall one thrust another. They shall walk every one in his path, and when they fall upon the sword, they shall not be wounded. They shall run to and fro in the city. They shall run upon the wall. They shall climb up upon the houses. They shall enter in at the windows like a thief. The earth shall quake before them. the heavens shall tremble, the sun and the moon shall be dark, and the stars shall withdraw their shining. And the Lord shall utter his voice before his army, for his camp is very great, for he is strong that executeth his word. For the day of the Lord is great and very terrible, and who can abide it? Therefore also now, saith the Lord, turn ye even to me with all your heart, and with fasting, and with weeping, and with mourning, and rend your heart, and not your garments, and turn unto the Lord your God, for he is gracious and merciful, slow to anger, and of great kindness, and repenteth him of the evil. Who knoweth if he will return and repent, and leave a blessing behind him, even a meat offering and a drink offering unto the Lord your God? Blow the trumpet in Zion, sanctify a fast, call a solemn assembly. Gather the people, sanctify the congregation, assemble the elders, gather the children, and those that suck the breasts. Let the bridegroom go forth of his chamber, and the bride out of her closet. Let the priests, the ministers of the Lord, weep between the porch and the altar, and let them say, Spare thy people, O Lord, and give not thine heritage to reproach, that the heathen should rule over them. Wherefore should they say among the people, Where is their God? Then will the Lord be jealous for his land, and pity his people. Yea, the Lord will answer and say unto his people, Behold, I will send you corn, and wine, and oil, and ye shall be satisfied therewith. And I will no more make you a reproach among the heathen, but I will remove far off from you the northern army, and will drive him into a land barren and desolate, with his face toward the east sea, and his hinder part toward the utmost sea. And his stink shall come up, and his ill savour shall come up, because he hath done great things. Fear not, O land, be glad and rejoice, for the Lord will do great things. Be not afraid, ye beast of the field, for the pastures of the wilderness do spring, for the tree beareth her fruit, the fig tree and the vine do yield their strength. Be glad then, ye children of Zion, and rejoice in the Lord your God, for he hath given you the former rain moderately, and he will cause to come down for you the rain, the former rain, and the latter rain in the first month. And the floors shall be full of wheat, and the vats shall overflow with wine and oil. And I will restore to you the years that the locust hath eaten, the cankerworm, and the caterpillar, and the palmer worm, my great army which I sent among you. And ye shall eat in plenty, and be satisfied, and praise the name of the Lord your God, that hath dealt wondrously with you. And my people shall never be ashamed. And ye shall know that I am in the midst of Israel, and that I am the Lord your God, and none else, and my people shall never be ashamed. And it shall come to pass afterward that I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, your old men shall dream dreams, your young men shall see visions, and also upon the servants and upon the handmaids in those days will I pour out my spirit. And I will show wonders in the heavens and in the earth, blood and fire and pillars of smoke. The sun shall be turned into darkness, and the moon into blood, before the great and the terrible day of the Lord come. And it shall come to pass that whosoever shall call on the name of the Lord shall be delivered. For in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem shall be deliverance, as the Lord hath said, and in the remnant whom the Lord shall call. James 4. From whence come wars and fightings among you? Come they not hence, even of your lusts that war in your members? Ye lust and have not, ye kill, and desire to have, and cannot obtain. Ye fight and war, yet ye have not, because ye ask not. Ye ask and receive not, because ye ask amiss, that ye may consume it upon your lusts. Ye adulterers and adulteresses, know ye not that the friendship of the world is enmity with God? Whosoever therefore will be a friend of the world is the enemy of God. Do ye think that the Scripture saith in vain, The Spirit that dwelleth in us lusteth to envy? But he giveth more grace. Wherefore he saith, God resisteth the proud, but giveth grace unto the humble. Submit yourselves therefore to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw nigh to God, and he will draw nigh to you. Cleanse your hands, ye sinners, and purify your hearts, ye double-minded. Be afflicted, and mourn, and weep. Let your laughter be turned to mourning, and your joy to heaviness. Humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and he shall lift you up. Speak not evil one of another, brethren. He that speaketh evil of his brother, and judgeth his brother, speaketh evil of the law, and judgeth the law. But if thou judge the law, thou art not a doer of the law, but a judge. There is one lawgiver, who is able to save and to destroy. Who art thou that judgest another? Go to now, ye that say, Today or tomorrow we will go into such a city, and continue there a year, and buy and sell, and get gain. Whereas ye know not what shall be on the morrow. For what is your life? It is even a vapor that appeareth for a little time, and then vanisheth away. For that ye ought to say, If the Lord will, we shall live, and do this or that. But now ye rejoice in your boastings. All such rejoicing is evil. Therefore to him that knoweth to do good, and doeth it not, to him it is sin. James 5. Go to now, ye rich men, weep and howl for your miseries that shall come upon you. Your riches are corrupted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver is cankered, and the rust of them shall be a witness against you, and shall eat your flesh as it were fire. Ye have heaped treasure together for the last days. Behold, the hire of the laborers who have reaped down your fields, which is of you kept back by fraud, crieth, and the cries of them which have reaped are entered into the ears of the Lord of Sabaoth. Ye have lived in pleasure on the earth, and been wanton. Ye have nourished your hearts as in a day of slaughter. Ye have condemned and killed the just, and he doth not resist you. Be patient therefore, brethren, unto the coming of the Lord. Behold, the husbandman waiteth for the precious fruit of the earth, and hath long patience for it, until he receive the early and latter rain. Be ye also patient, establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord draweth nigh. Grudge not one against another, brethren, lest ye be condemned. Behold, the judge standeth before the door. Take, my brethren, the prophets, who have spoken in the name of the Lord, for an example of suffering affliction and of patience. Behold, we count them happy which endure. Ye have heard of the patience of Job, and have seen the end of the Lord, that the Lord is very pitiful, and of tender mercy. But above all things, my brethren, swear not, neither by heaven, neither by the earth, neither by any other oath, but let your yea be yea, and your nay, nay, lest ye fall into condemnation. Is any among you afflicted? Let him pray. Is any merry? Let him sing psalms. Is any sick among you? Let him call for the elders of the church, and let them pray over him, anointing him with oil in the name of the Lord. And the prayer of faith shall save the sick, and the Lord shall raise him up, and if he have committed sins, they shall be forgiven him. Confess your faults one to another, and pray one for another, that ye may be healed. The effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much. Elias was a man subject to like passions as we are, and he prayed earnestly that it might not rain, and it rained not on the earth by the space of 3 years and 6 months. And he prayed again, and the heaven gave rain, and the earth brought forth her fruit. Brethren, if any of you do err from the truth, and one convert him, let him know that he which converteth the sinner from the error of his way shall save a soul from death, and shall hide a multitude of sins.
Praise Jesus, everybody. Thank you for joining me once again on the Lookout Guy podcast. And I am Michael Tobin, your Lookout Guy. Well, I've been in my vehicle studio, I call it, for way better than an hour with my windows rolled up, and oxygen is already depleting. Thank God it's not a hot day, but I figured I'd try to go to a relatively quiet spot and park where I won't be hearing a bunch of rice burners, loud exhaust, and fake Ford Mustang muscle cars accelerating and wasting gas on a 40-mile-an-hour road. But that was unsuccessful, as you'll be able to hear. And it was relatively quiet, but not really too much different than if I was actually in my home recording as well, because you could still hear sirens once in a while, maybe a train here and there in the background. But until I get a actual studio, I guess it's going to be as realistic as possible with background noises. Today I want to feature a song that, again, my good friend Vedi, composer, singer, songwriter in Russia, began in about 2020. And it is called Warzone. It is a sonata with 4 parts to it. And I've played this song various times already throughout the past year. And it is called Warzone. And it is, it's a little prophetic in nature because of the title of it, as well as the titles of the 4 parts of the composition. And Vedi writes, I started composing this work in 2020 when the whole world celebrated the 75th anniversary of the victory over the Nazis. The sonata is dedicated to the memory of dead soldiers. The first movement is a picture of the field after the battle. The second movement is memories and a prediction of a brighter future. The third movement is lamento. It is a cry for the dead soldiers as well as a prayer. And the fourth movement is called the end of a war. And this music composition is very fascinating to me. I love it, as well as all of the other compositions from Vedi that I have played. She plays the violin. She's a master at everything she does. Violin, keyboard, piano, and she even does jazz compositions, and she recently did a rock version, a cover of Sweet Home Alabama, which is an awesome song. And you know what, by the time this is over, I think I'll have that on cue as well as Warzone. But first, I want to play for you a very educated and detailed summary on what is going on with Putin, Russian President Vladimir Putin, and his invasion of Ukraine. It is by a friend of mine I've met about a year ago. He is a pastor of a church in Santa Maria, California, and he has a audio or a video podcast that he produces daily, and something that I am just dreaming of being able to do myself, do some daily podcasts instead of weekly. And it is actually crucial that I stay in the habit of doing my Lookout Guy podcast at least on a weekly basis, because of all of the probably 11 or 13 podcast platforms that the Lookout Guy gets auto-generated to. There's only one that requires that I have a podcast at least once a month, and that's iHeartRadio. And I keep on telling people I recommend downloading the iHeartRadio app. I'm not getting any kickbacks or money for promoting iHeartRadio, but it is, I believe, the most effective app you can have, because wherever you are in the United States, you're going to be able to listen to a local radio station as you're listening to it. So, and it has all kinds of podcasts available. So this is the reason why I'm in the habit of doing at least weekly podcasts. So I don't get stagnant and just do it once per month. And then when I want to do it within the timeline, all of a sudden something goes wrong and I'm not able to do it and I miss the deadline. And then I have to wait another couple of weeks before I can be broadcast on iHeartRadio again. So I don't want to lose any of those platforms. But Dr. Jerry Sheidbach, I'm going to guess his age. He's probably low 70s. He certainly seems like he's not close to 80. He's pretty vibrant and healthy and vigorous, which is a very good thing to be. In fact, I just turned 58 years old a couple days ago, and everybody always thinks that I'm in my 30s, so hopefully when I'm pushing 70 or pushing 80, people are going to say, man, you only seem like you're 60. So that'd be awesome. But 60 and 70 is not even old, in today's terms. But Dr. Jerry Sheidbach, awesome pastor. I plan on getting to know him on a more personal basis, other than just being a viewer of his video podcast. But he gives pre-Soviet Ukraine summary, very detailed and educated, from pre-Soviet Ukraine through 2022. And Dr. Sheidbach, he says that he visited Soviet Russia at least 10 times back in the Soviet days, and he's also visited Ukraine on a number of occasions. So he is a very, very qualified person to get this type of a summary on what is going on. And I've broken it down into 8 points. Number 1 is 3 reasons that Putin has put forward for the invasion on Ukraine, which is NATO, the Nazis, and Putin's claim of the Soviet creation of Ukraine as we know it. And just look at the history of Ukraine and you'll discover otherwise. Number 2 is the Minsk Agreement and release of 15 Soviet occupied nations during what we call the fall of the Soviet Empire. Number 3 is Putin's plans to reestablish former regions of the former Soviet boundaries. Number 4 is the summary of post-Soviet Ukrainian presidents. Number 5 is Jeffrey Epstein's Ukrainian relation. Number 6 is the United States relations to Ukraine. Number 7, possible Putin backout plan, because it doesn't look good even now. And 4 days ago, when this recording that I'm going to play for you occurred, didn't look good then, and it looks even worse for Putin right now. And number 8 is possible Biden motives towards Ukraine and or Ukraine's current president Zelensky. So that is coming up on the Lookout Guy podcast. I want to play for you at least 40 minutes, and I didn't include the complete, because it went on for like an hour, but the best part of it is 40 minutes, and if you like, you can look up Dr. Jerry Sheidbach, the Lighthouse Baptist Church, Santa Maria, California, and you can watch his video podcasts, and you can look up the one from 4 days ago, the 9th of March of this year, 2022. So here we go with Dr. Jerry Sheidbach, and followed by my good friend and Vedi on the Lookout Guy podcast. Oh, and as I mentioned, Sweet Home Alabama is collaborated with Vedi and my good friend from Pakistan, Imran Ahmed.
But 3 reasons Putin offers for going into Ukraine that he argues justify the invasion. First, the fact that Ukraine has made open overtures of an interest to break their treaty with Moscow by joining NATO, or to compromise the neutrality agreement, they call it. Putin has understandable concerns about NATO establishing yet another foothold in a country bordering Russia, since he regards NATO as his enemy. And that would be because NATO was actually originally formed to block Soviet aggression. That's what it was formed for. These countries wanted to send a message to Russia: leave us alone. Because if you attack any one of us, you have started war. You have started World War. That's what you've done. Because to attack one, you attack us all. That's the agreement these nations have with NATO. And a lot of these countries desired to become part of NATO specifically because they wanted protection from Russian aggression. So when the Soviet Empire fell apart, a significant number of those countries that were once part of the USSR did appeal or apply and then finally qualify to join NATO. I forget what the exact qualifications are to join NATO. I've forgotten if I ever knew them. It seems to me that I remember something. But anyway, second, that's the first reason. Second, Ukraine has Nazi groups in their country, and some of these Nazis are in positions of power and influence in the government of Ukraine. So he argues he wants to go denazify the country. I mentioned to you that someone who understands Russian, Ukrainian, who understands Russian, was and is able and does watch Russian TV, reported that, as a matter of fact, Russian media is saying that Ukraine is under the oppression of Nazis, and Russia has sent her troops in to deliver Ukraine from these Nazis. That's what they're saying. In fact, in one case, Putin said to the Russian people through their media that Russia beat the Nazis in World War II and will beat them again in World War III. Now, that's a translation and an interpretation that I received from an obviously biased source, but I don't have any reason to think the guy would lie. It's just that sounds like such an outrageous thing for Putin to say.
Actually, a pretty big following. There's a following that says that we won World War II without Russia beating the Nazis.
Oh yeah, that's old lore. That's old lore. That's been around for a very long time. That's true. No, I'm talking about him saying that we beat him in World War II and we will beat him again in World War III. That's what I'm focusing on. Yeah. So he's talking about World War III, at least according to this particular report. So that's the second reason. Nazi groups in the country of Ukraine, and he wants to go deliver them because of the significant number of Russian people in Ukraine that he feels a responsibility for. So he wants to go in there and help deliver them from becoming Nazified. And the third reason is Russia has established Ukraine, and they built it. In other words, modern Ukraine is literally the creation of Russia, especially the city of Kiev. As I mentioned last time, Kiev is a very important city to the Russians on a sentimental level, on an emotional level. Very important. It was their pride and joy. It was their crown jewel of the Soviet Empire. And during the time that they were, as a matter of fact, and it's true, developing Ukraine into a thing of notice, a model Russian city, a modern Russian city, Russians were populating Ukraine heavily. And today there are many Russians in Ukraine. And there are a significant number of Russians, if you consider 10 to 15% of the population significant, and I would, that want to be connected with Russia. They are pro-Russia. So there are some like that. We've got some here. But really, yeah, we've had pro-Russian communist operators in America for a very, very, very long time. And they've gotten into our schools. They've worked their way through our academia, our education system. They've worked their way into the public school system, where they've been able to indoctrinate a couple of generations now of young people, many of whom are not even particularly aware of it, but they have imbibed socialist doctrine, communist doctrine. And so, and we've been under attack by the communists in Russia for many, many years. I mean, I still remember that scene of Brezhnev. Was it Brezhnev?
No, Khrushchev.
Khrushchev, who took his shoe off.
Yeah.
Some say that's a myth, but I seen it.
This one
I saw it. Yeah. And so that, what can I say? You know, when you've been around long enough, you can go, wait a minute, I saw that. But he takes his shoe off and he's pounding on the podium saying, we're gonna crush America. So that's back in the height of what was called the Cold War. And so, and there were people over here in America that were cheering him on, a lot of them. And McCarthy was right. We were being infiltrated by communist operators all over the place, particularly through our media and in our universities, in our schools. People are smart. They know propaganda, the value and the power of propaganda to shape attitudes and worldviews. And that's what they set about to do. I'm getting a little deeper into this than I care to go. I just want to say that when, we talk about a lot of Russians in Ukraine, we got a bunch of Russians here. But anyway. So here's what Putin said, for example, when he was explaining his intentions regarding Ukraine. He said, quote, I will start with the fact that modern Ukraine was entirely created by Russia, or, to be more precise, by Bolshevik communist Russia. Boy, there's an old reach to the past, huh? Putin went on to argue that, quote, Ukraine is not just a neighboring country for us. It is an inalienable part of our own history, culture, and spiritual space, end quote, whatever that means. And then he goes on to say, and quote, since time immemorial. I know that. What I want to get across here is how emotionally attached Putin is to particularly Kiev and to Ukraine. He says, and quote, since time immemorial, the people living in the southwest of what has historically been Russian land have called themselves Russians and Orthodox Christians. That must be the spiritual space he was talking about earlier. So those are three good reasons justifying Putin's invasion into Ukraine. I mean, if you look at all these things from a certain point of view. And then the fourth good reason Actually, I guess that's about it. I really can't think of any other of Putin's good reasons that he has for invading Ukraine, none that he's put forward. Unless we want to add to reason the third, that the Ukraine was a virtual wasteland, with the exception of the area we call Crimea, and then some of the northeasternmost part of Ukraine, which was inhabited by ancient Vikings Goths, who were very independent and kind of, I don't know, they didn't create a country. They just lived their lives. They're very tribal and isolated from one another, that kind of stuff, until Mother Russia moved in and settled the land. At least that's how I understand it. If you've got a more clear understanding of this history, I'm listening. I'm just trying to kind of become acquainted with all this stuff right now. In other words, the claim is Ukraine actually belongs to Russia. That's the point. Kind of like the same way that California belongs to Mexico. Okay? I'm just saying. And, of course, it doesn't. Anyway, so let's give, we'll give 2 points to the third one. Anyway, let me respond to these claims. First, you might wonder why Putin really doesn't make a big deal about the treaty in his argument. You know, that would be because there is no treaty. The Soviet Empire collapsed in the span of years 1989 through 1991. And during this time, protests began breaking out all over the empire among nations that were once part of the Soviet Union who wanted out. They wanted to formally declare themselves independent of Russia, and of the Soviet Empire particularly. And Russia didn't have the strength at that time to keep them. I mean, their economy was collapsed, all the infrastructure. I mean, when I landed I found out, by the way, that I wasn't in Ukraine in 91. I was in Ukraine in 92. So my mistake. I had reason to ask Mr. Sheidbach to pull out of my library my travel diary for my first trip to Russia. And that's when I realized, oh, yeah, okay, that was in 92. But in any event, so I didn't want to offer that correction. But anyway, so but even when I went there, as late as I did, okay, after the collapse, Ukraine looked like a war zone. I mean, literally, it looked like a war zone. It looked like pictures you're seeing now of some of the cities around Kiev and some of the cities there on the border of Crimea and Ukraine. If we're going to go ahead and allow ourselves to cede Crimea to the Russians. But anyway, one after another of the former Soviet states opted out of the USSR, and these were Belarus, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Estonia, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Latvia, Lithuania, Moldova, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, all the stands. How you doing, Stan? and of course the Ukraine. 15 of them pulled out. Now our interest is with the Ukraine, of course. Ukraine declared its independence in August of 1991. And the Ukrainian parliament put that matter to a vote of the Ukrainian people. And 84% of the eligible voters turned up to vote, and 92% of the vote affirmed Ukraine's declaration of independence from the Soviet Union, which at that time was defined by the borders that we have in place today, including Crimea. So that's Ukraine. And Ukraine declared its independence in December of 91, and then the vote took place. They declared it in August, and then in December they voted, and the vote was affirmed. And on December the 2nd, however, Ukraine was acknowledged by all the world powers as an independent nation. And
okay, folks, excuse me, but I'm just going to break in. This is the beauty of live broadcasting. Did you notice that Dr. Sheidbach said that he began going to Russia post-Soviet timeline? So if you took note of what I said earlier in my introduction, I inadvertently said that Dr. Sheidbach visited Russia during the Soviet era. So I was wrong in voicing that. So he actually began going post-Soviet era. So continuing on now with Dr. Sheidbach.
welcomed to the fraternity of nations, as it were. Russia attempted to resist the move all the way through, considering Kiev a sort of second capital of the Soviet Empire, and claiming possession of Ukraine because it was founded by Russia. In other words, same arguments we hear today. This was not an easy divorce, in other words. Very hard feelings developed on both sides. Ukraine has a special place in the heart of Russians. Of course, they said the same thing about Georgia and all of them, but anyway. So Russia wanted Ukraine to enter into a kind of restructured version of the Soviet Union, but that failed. None of the countries trusted the aged bear. But Ukraine had opted instead to join Russia and Belarus in something called a Commonwealth of Independent States, or the CIS. So, this is going somewhere, so hang on with me. Bear with me. December 1991, Ukraine officially becomes an independent state recognized and welcomed among the nations of the world. But Russia wasn't letting go. Kept trying to grab and hang on to Ukraine. On December 8th, 1991, Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine signed a treaty forming the Commonwealth of Independent States, as I mentioned. By December 21st, either some other, I think 8 other Soviet republics joined what became what began to be called the Minsk Treaty, because it was formed in Belarus, in Minsk, Belarus. I was there in 1992. I found my trip. 1993, Ukraine Parliament ratified the Minsk Treaty Agreement to participate in the Commonwealth. Are your eyes rolling back into your head? You're falling asleep on me yet? No, I'm going somewhere with this. 1997, they signed the big treaty. Now, this was between Ukraine and Russia, and it was signed by the two states. It was ratified by Ukraine in 1998. And the question, what motivated Ukraine to sign, was this. The tensions that were going on between Russia and Ukraine hinged much on Ukraine's insistence that it be recognized as an independent state. And so Russia was willing to acknowledge, or the Kremlin was willing to acknowledge, Kiev as a separate sovereign state, Ukraine, using Kiev as a metaphor for the entire country, Ukraine, as a separate sovereign state and as equal partners. And that was crucial to Ukraine's interest, which was what motivated them to sign on this treaty. But for Russia, the treaty didn't make them happy. Like I said, it was a messy divorce. They felt the treaty made them forfeit Crimea. This is important. Russia, when they signed the treaty, they understood this treaty meant they were letting go of Crimea. They were letting go of the town of Sevastopol. And they were letting go of access to the Black Sea. Now, the Russians also feared they were pushing Ukraine towards NATO. So Russia's interest in signing was to establish a unity of identity between Ukraine and Russia by insisting that this treaty would provide for dual citizenship automatically. Everybody who is a citizen of Ukraine would be considered a citizen of Russia. Everyone who was a citizen of Russia would be considered a citizen of Ukraine. Dual citizenship. And then this treaty was intended to block Ukraine from ever joining NATO. But that wasn't working. So what they did is they put language in the treaty that read this way, quote, this is kind of an important part of it, so, quote, that Ukraine would abstain from participation or support of any actions directed against the other. I shouldn't have said Ukraine there. Neither Russia nor Ukraine would participate or support any action directed against the other. Now, according to Vladimir Lukin, who was at that time member of the Russian State Duma, he admitted that this did not provide a strong guarantee against NATO. But, he said, quote, this is a serious argument which, if this treaty is ratified, will work in our favor, end quote. So that was his argument before the Duma, encouraging Russia to sign on this treaty. And this is important because, in other words, the Russians knew that this treaty did not prohibit Ukraine from entering into NATO. But they reasoned, if Ukraine accepts this treaty and leaves this language in there, we can use this language to make the argument that they can't join NATO because NATO, that would be participating in an organization that's, out to get us, that kind of stuff. That's interesting, isn't it? So anyway, it's important to note that Russians themselves recognized the treaty did not guarantee Ukraine would not join NATO, but that some stipulations in the language of the treaty would provide a good argument against them doing so. It's typical Russian speak. Like I said, I went into Russia, 10 times, 10 years, every year, straight. And so I got very familiar with how they think and how they do things in terms of, for example, just negotiating with regard to the school, the college I was trying to get going there. Later, we finally got something going with Ron Reasoner, missionary Ron Reasoner. But the 2 years I went before I got a chance to get connected with him, trying to negotiate with these people on something like this. Oh my goodness. It's a nightmare. But anyway. But I did run into this kind of thing, where you gotta be careful. You're talking to them and they're saying something and you go along with it and you realize, wait a minute, that's not what I meant. That's not what I was agreeing to. But then they come back with that language and they can skew it in just such a way to make you think or make it sound like that you did know, you knew, and all this. It's amazing. But anyway, and not all Russians are that way any more than it's true that all Americans are any one way. You understand that? But in 1997, this big treaty, as it came to be called, was signed. In 1998, it was ratified. In 1999, the treaty was signed into law by Russia's president, but only after Ukraine promised to allow Russia to have access to the Black Sea and providing access to Russia's fleet and Crimea. So they allowed Russia to have some ports there on the coastline of Crimea with the Black Sea. Now, this treaty, by the way, was a 10-year, it matured every 10 years. It's another thing people don't know. In 2009, then, 10 years later, the treaty was automatically renewed. In 2010, Russia helped Viktor Yanukovych to become president of Ukraine. And he was considered a puppet of Putin. Russia was putting considerable pressure on Ukrainian elections and manipulated and maneuvered and did what they could to extend their influence into Ukraine to establish Yanukovych as the president. The truth is, of course, Russia had an interest in continuing the corruption that was going on there, had their dirty little hands in it, as a matter of fact. But they had a special and hidden concern about Ukraine moving farther out of Russia's sphere of influence. So they would promote leaders who would end the corruption, was the campaign slogan. End the corruption. We got to stop this corruption. Russia had no interest in stopping the corruption. Their only interest was to control whoever was president in order to make sure Ukraine did not become part of NATO. So Russia promoted Ukrainian leaders who were supposed to clean up Ukraine, but were actually, the reason they supported them was because they were loyal to Russia, to Putin, and ended up only deepening the corruption there, by the way. The corruption in Russia is unbelievable. The oligarchs in Russia are just over the top. It's a mess. But Russia wanted political leaders who would keep Ukraine from moving toward Europe, something called the Ukrainian-European Alliance or Association or something like that. Or they didn't want Ukraine to get involved with NATO. They didn't want Ukraine spinning off and becoming aligned with European nations or with the Western powers. Well, the corruption just kept getting worse and worse. The swamp, it was getting real swampy in Ukraine. All kinds of sex trafficking, all kinds of drug stuff going on, all money stuff. Boy, I tell you, a lot of bribery money was moving through there. A lot of money laundering was going on with the banks. It was unbelievable. So in 2014, I shouldn't have said and so. In 2014, our CIA conducted a color revolution in Ukraine and installed a CIA puppet president named Petro Poroshenko. You probably heard that name. He's the guy that was president of Ukraine from 2010 till 2019. Our CIA taking advantage of the rising anti-Russian sentiment because it had come to a boil in Ukraine. There's always been a majority in Ukraine that want nothing to do with Russia. They don't want to be connected to Russia. And that reveals itself early on in 1991 when they had 94% of the electorate voted against continuing an alliance with or continuing to be associated with and connected to Russia. So anyway, they cleverly called this revolution the Dignity Revolution. In other words, the CIA came along, did the same thing Russians did, and they said, hey, it's too much corruption. We got to clean up the corruption. And Poroshenko ran as a fellow who was going to clean up the corruption. So this revolution simply replaced a Russian puppet who was corrupt, Viktor Yushchenko, with an American puppet that was corrupt, Petro Poroshenko. So we went from a Russian sympathizer, Yushchenko, to a Western sympathizer, Poroshenko. So rather than restore dignity to Ukraine, of course, the United States deep state puppet president, Poroshenko, simply dug the swamp deeper. It just got worse. Or better for the super rich elites who used Ukraine as a kind of hub for a lot of their nefarious activities. I understand Epstein collected most of the girls he used on his island from Ukraine. And the reason wasn't because necessarily Ukraine had all the girls that would be willing to do this. No, it's because Ukraine would look the other way. Under Poroshenko, they would just look the other way. They provided legal cover for these guys to pull this stuff and to operate without scrutiny. So Biden was part of all that, by the way. Hunter became a sort of middleman for money laundering. More on that later. Now 2018 comes along. Meanwhile, in America, of course, 2016 came along. And in 2017, Trump became president. In 2018, in Ukraine, upon the next renewal date for the treaty, the National Security Defense Council of Ukraine opted not to renew. And by then, Poroshenko was under immense political pressure and a rising star, a fellow by the name of Vladimir Zelensky, was challenging him for an upcoming election, and being under all that pressure because of the corruption scandals that were sharking him, and we're really just circling him with the fins up and the teeth chopping. You can hear Jaws music. And being under that immense pressure, he was forced, literally, politically, to go along with this business of ending the treaty. That's so important. In other words, the treaty has nothing to do with any of this. And I thought it did, you know. So, to me, this is a very important thing to find out. But the treaty has nothing to do with any of this. Poroshenko signs off on ending what's called the Big Treaty. So there's nothing in the way of Ukraine joining NATO or the European Alliance or whatever they want to do. So now we come to 2019, and there's nothing Poroshenko could do to remove himself from the cloud of stink, corruption stink, that surrounded him, that was attached to him and his government. And so Zelensky won by an overwhelming 75% of the vote. And that's totally, that's a situation where, again, they had the CIA manipulation of the election in place. But what happened in 2016 is similar to what happened in 2019, or actually 2018, and then 2019 is when he assumes the government. I think that's how that worked. But anyway, 75% of the vote went to Zelensky against Poroshenko. And so they got rid of that guy, and they got a new guy in there who was supposed to come in there and clean up the swamp. And then not long after that, we have the infamous perfect phone call between Trump and Zelensky, right? Remember that? Where Trump congratulates Zelensky on his win, and Zelensky says, well, we used your playbook. We did it the way you did it. He gave him a lot of praise, a lot of compliments and all kind of stuff, which were actually kind of appropriate, I think. But anyway, and he said, we're going to clean up the swamp, just like you are. We're going to clean up our swamp here in Ukraine. Well, Trump advised him to look into this Biden crime family nonsense and get to the bottom of it. You get to the bottom of it. To find out what's true about this whole mess that we're dealing with over here. So anyway, and that became a big thing with the Democrats over here, as you know. We don't need to revisit that. You lived it. You were there. Just another deep state lie. For some reason, however, and you heard me mention this before, I wonder, because after the election here, Zelensky dropped pursuing, looking into this issue with Biden and Hunter. And the swamp, apparently, I don't know, swamped him, stalled him, diverted his attention. I don't know. I don't know what activity has been going on the part of Zelensky to really seriously clean and drain the swamp there in Russia. I do know he was getting all the same kind of beef and resistance and problems that Trump was getting here. So now we come to 2022. And Russia invades Ukraine. Wouldn't dare invade Ukraine while Trump was in the office. Now that Trump's in exile, and we've got a Pino, a president in name only, a usurper holding the office, Russia stirs up and decides he's going to go in. You might remember when I said, perhaps Russia, because the big question is, why is there this long convoy of military gear? I mean, they got missile launching vehicles, they've got everything, a lot of personnel carriers, and all that. They're all lined up at 47 miles of this. They're just sitting there. Well, everybody is wondering, trying to offer some suggestion what's going on. One of the things I said is I think that's there he came in because he did go into Kiev, and he got slapped in the nose, stung bad, and went out, driven out. So now he's attacking all along the, I guess you'd call it the northeast border with Russia, and then the border between Crimea and Ukraine. It's really all Ukraine, but in order to have this conversation, I need to do it this way. So there, Crimea coming in and encroaching further. And then Donetsk, I think it's called, and Luhansk. Some of these names I just don't know how to pronounce them, I'm sorry. But those two regions, or cities, are these cities or regions, I don't really know, that supposedly have declared independence from Ukraine and identify themselves as Russian. At least that's what Putin says. Putin has just declared it. Now, there are people, those are heavily populated with Russian people, so there's a significant Russian contingency within those regions. But whether or not it's the will of the majority of the people in those regions to declare independence from Ukraine is an open question. We have reason to believe it's a minority. But Putin just declared them to be independent. So anyway, remember I said that maybe what Putin has decided to do, he got more than he can chew here. He got far more resistance from Ukraine than he expected. And so he's changed his strategy here and decided to just position himself as strong as possible to negotiate, to get as much as he can from Ukraine, and then back off. You know, well, isn't it funny what's happened? I don't know if you heard about this or not, but Russia has offered to back out, to leave. But what he wants, he's saying, I don't want Kiev. Well, we know that's a lie. He has said so many times. We know he wants Kiev. He says, I don't want to take over Ukraine. Well, we know that's a lie. He has said so. We know that he wants to take Ukraine. What's happened is he's been beaten. So now he's trying to get out with as much as he can take with him and save face. So here's what he's laid down. He wants Ukraine to recognize Crimea as Russian. He wants Ukraine to give him the Crimea. He's already taken it, and he's holding it. And everybody, you know, like I told you, Biden watched from his golf cart while that happened, and ordered our government to send blankets to the people there in Crimea. You know, in other words, Obama gave Crimea to Putin.
Biden or?
I said Biden, didn't I? I meant Obama. And now Biden is giving him the rest of Ukraine. We'll see what goes on there. I'm not sure Biden wants Russia to have Ukraine. I think what Biden wants is for Russia to get rid of Zelensky. But anyway, so that's part of the deal. And then recognize the independence of Donetsk and Lugansk. I guess that's how you say those regions that declared independence. Well, a faction within those regions declared independence, and then Russia acknowledged their independence is what happened, just so you know. And then, this third demand, Russia wants Ukraine to change its constitution to enshrine neutrality, or in other words, to guarantee that Ukraine will not connect itself with NATO, or the European alliance for that matter. So, they've offered, this is what they've offered, for a peace treaty, to sign another treaty and to be at peace with one another. And the spokesman for Moscow said, we really are finishing the demilitarization of Ukraine. Of course, they got to talk like this. We will finish it. But the main thing is that Ukraine ceases its military action. See, now that's the fourth thing. They want the Ukrainian military to surrender, to put down their arms. the funny thing about this is that all that Russia has done would only serve to underscore why Ukraine would need the protection of some alliance with other nations like the European Union or like NATO. Clearly, Putin has lost in Ukraine. He wants out with as much as he can take with him from his attack. Zelensky has made positive overtures in response to Putin's offer. Now, this is interesting. He says that he is open to compromise on NATO, on Crimea, on the separatist republics, but not on surrender. He won't lay down his arms. He's not going to become demilitarized. He's not going to allow that. Zelensky's ready to give Putin everything he's demanding except surrender? Isn't that kind of like surrender? Now, I'm not in Zelensky's shoes. I'm not living, holed up in a building with people trying to kill me every day. What have they done? They've stopped 3 plots to murder him or assassinate him. I want to put out a caveat here. I'm not living with bombs falling all around my city and all over my country in the position of president where I have the responsibility to make a decision that's going to impact the lives of my entire nation. I mean, I get it. So I'm not going to be too hard on Zelensky here. But I'm going to say this would be a surrender. Russia invaded Ukraine and took Crimea, and Ukraine has been unwilling to acknowledge Crimea and to give it up to Russia. But now now Russia attacks Ukraine and just beats them and beats them and beats them with all these missiles. And so he's beating him into submission to surrender Crimea. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Дорогие друзья, я бы хотела добавить 2 слова о произведении. Это произведение я начинала писать еще в прошлом году, когда все мы, всей страной, всем миром отмечали 75 лет победы над фашистами. И она посвящена памяти погибших воинов. Первая часть – это картина поля после войны. Вторая часть – воспоминания и одновременно предрекание светлого будущего и мира. Третья часть – ламенто – это плач о падших воинах и молитва одновременно. И 4-я часть называется «Конец войны». up. Big wheels keep on turning and carry me home to see my kid, singing songs about the Southland. Well, I'm messing about it once again, and I think it's the same, yes. Well, I heard Mr. Young sing about her. Well, I heard Neil put her down. Well, I hope Neil Young will remember. I saw the man turning him around. Anyhow, sweet home Alabama, where the skies are so blue. Sweet home Alabama, Lord, I'm coming home to you. And again, the love that's going on, and now we'll take what we could do. Now what I get does not bother me. Not the conscience bother you. Tell the truth. Sweet home Alabama, where the skies are so blue. Sweet home Alabama, Lord, I'm coming home to you. Has got a swampers, and they're renowned to pick us on a tune. Lord, they get me up so much, and they pick me up when I'm feeling blue. Now how about you? Sweet home Alabama, where the skies are so blue. Sweet home Alabama, Lord, I'm coming home to you. Sweet home Alabama, where the skies are so blue. Sweet home Alabama, Lord, I'm coming home to you. Sweet home Alabama, Lord, I'm coming home to you. Sweet home Alabama, where the sky is so blue. Sweet home Alabama, Lord, I'm coming home.